Welcome to Spark and Scale, the show for higher ed leaders learning, experimenting, and evolving how we shape our future. I'm your host, Mickey Baines. Come and join me. It's time to get started. We have another great episode. I want to say welcome back, but given that this is season 1 of Spark and Scale, it's hard to say that. But Geoff Baird, welcome to the show. You're definitely no stranger to me and to our podcast. I've had you on my other show before. Let me do a quick intro for you, if that's okay. You're the founder and CEO of EnrollML. You know, for everyone watching, listening, if you live under a rock, it's time to come out from under that rock and meet Geoff and learn about EnrollML. This is an AI-driven enrollment management platform that helps higher ed identify and act on deep behavioral signals. We're going to talk about signals shortly to improve recruitment, yield, and student success. Before founding EnrollML, Geoff spent over 35 years in various industries ranging from enterprise computing to mobile technology, all before turning all of his attention to higher ed and innovating within our space. Under your leadership, Geoff, EnrollML, you've supports, I don't know how many dozen of clients and institutions now. And I believe I saw a post recently, you just launched a new partnership. It was at University of Missouri at St. Louis, where you're going to co-design some next-gen enrollment and retention strategies. Piques my interest. Geoff, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Great to talk again, and great to talk on camera about some of the things we talk about off camera. And I will add that we actually have signed 2 what I'll kind of characterize as strategic AI partnerships, and one is with the University of Missouri St. Louis, and the second, which we just announced last week. Not sure when this will show up, but last week, as the calendar is today, with Xavier University. So we've got a couple of partners here that we are going to be really diving deep in collaboration with them to try and figure out exactly how and where AI is going to be used to improve the enrollment experience across the board for students, for institutions, and for the teams.
That's really exciting. I know you're excited about those opportunities. Before we get into the technology itself, let's talk about the other major thing. And as we're recording it, within the last week, maybe 1 week from today, as we record this, or maybe just over a week from today, new to your life, a book. You and one of your colleagues at EnrollML, Tej Matil, you wrote a new book, The Signal Solution. So exciting to see that come out. I was able to get an advanced copy, take a quick read, love every bit of it. It resonated because we've been talking this for so long. I almost say years, and it has been, even though we haven't really been talking about how to apply AI. It doesn't seem like that long in higher ed, but we have been working in this direction. We have been talking signals when it comes to AI specifically, and I know that's key to EnrollML. First off, how did you come to the idea or notion you needed to write the book?
Yeah, actually, it's it's a really interesting story. So Tej, who some of the viewers here may have run into, he's been a fixture, particularly in the Midwest, in enrollment management for decades. He's a career enrollment leader. And as you mentioned, the first 2/3 of my career were not in higher ed or enrollment. And I've been in about a decade now. So I'm still a newbie. But the net is that we came at this from slightly different lenses. Him, the career practitioner, and me coming in from the outside. And what was interesting about my particular lens was my entry point into higher education was essentially through the lens of helping colleges to improve their operating and financial performance. And of course, that starts and ends with students. And so I started learning rapidly, getting an education on how enrollment management worked. And when Tej and I started working together, and we talk about this a little bit in the book and the setup, but we argued all the time. And these arguments were really around what has to happen with enrollment management. And the premise of the book, and the thing that kind of have been driving all of us, but I think in some cases we put words around some concepts and ideas that perhaps as a group, we hadn't put words around before. And that is the fundamental environment that we operate in enrollment management has changed, and it has permanently changed. And it kind of begs the question, if the environment we're operating in has changed, why should we or would we expect that a playbook written for a previous era would operate the same way now? And so this Tej and I would have these heated discussions around what's next, what do we do, and where are the actual problems. And what was interesting was the more that we were digging into the AI in building a product, and the more that we saw and came to the conclusion that the AI's ability to uncover the deeper signals of the students actually started to unlock the answer of what do we need to do? And so we found this common ground. And fundamentally, it was Tej's idea almost a year ago that said, we need to start turning on the tape recorder when we have these arguments, discussions, debates, and these sort of aha moments. And as we worked with more and more institutions and saw more and more data, hundreds of millions of rows of data, a picture started to be painted of a new playbook. And that's what led us to ultimately turn those recordings, into a book. And I will say, I'm sure there's a lot of people watching who have completed dissertations and/or books. It was way harder than I thought it was going to be. It seemed like such a good idea at the time, but we're really pleased with it, and we think that there are nuggets of insight in there, for everyone, right, from presidents and CFOs and CMOs down to admissions counselors. We think there's something in there that might help us to take a critical look in the mirror as to how we're doing things now. What are the things we believe, and why do we believe those things? And are the things we believe to be true yesterday still true today, and will they be true tomorrow?
So I'm going to ask a couple of questions about the book and get some thoughts from you. So in the book, you talk a bit about comfort metrics. The things we're relying on, the FAFSA completions, event attendance, things like that to measure engagement. So what's the risk of continuing to build strategy around those outdated indicators? And I guess the follow-up to that, which I'll go ahead and ask, how does signal intelligence shift that paradigm?
Yeah, great question. And there's obviously that's a whole chapter on this thing we coined, the comfort metrics. And this kind of gets back to these conversations that not only Tej and I had, but we're also informed from all of our experiences across dozens of colleges that we collectively worked with. And the comfort metrics are they're the reports that we generate every week, every month. They are the decks that we send up and present with cabinet, with trustees, and they're all the sort of common stages. And you mentioned two of them, FAFSA submission. Yep. We know that does not mean the same thing now as it did 4 or 5 years ago. And interestingly enough, with the problems, was that last year or 2 years ago, where the FAFSAs didn't get out, we had a lot of friends and colleagues who lost signal. They were banking on that, right? That was the thing they held on to kind of give them a temperature gauge of the class. Interestingly enough, we had already uncovered when that happened, sort of the true signal of the FAFSA and could see beyond that. But a classic comfort metric is the campus visit. And I'll explain what this means for a moment, because this is where we can be misled. And we talk in the book about the fact that our funnels in many cases, and I've seen this in dozens of institutions that I've worked with, the funnel can be misleading. And we'll use the campus visit. By and large, if you were to run statistical regressions on the impact of the campus visit, the group of students who visit campus enroll at a higher rate than those who don't. And we've all seen that, and we all say, Geoff, we know that. But what's really interesting, and this has been where this is really where a great example of where AI provides real material impact, and that is our groupings of putting students either in a visit category or a non-visit category. We didn't do that because that was the most precise thing we wanted. We did it because it was the most precise we could get. Because the reality is that the visit is not the same for you and I. I may visit because the institution's my top choice, and you might be visiting because your parents are making you. And the implication of this visit is that when we create these groups, profile groups, or groups of kids who visit or don't visit, what that really is driving is focus and time and energy. And it is really easy to look at a group, and this we talk about this in the book. These are real statistics from a institution that we worked with, where their group of students, when they look at who visited versus who did not, the group that visits enrolls at 755% greater rate than those who don't visit. And of course, if any of us running our teams looked at that, we would say, we have to focus. We have to get kids in, and we have to focus on them.
I've had those conversations with schools.
That's right.
We know this. We got to get them. How do we get them to campus?
Done the same thing. Yep. And by the way, I'll mention in a minute here. I guess I'll mention now, but this is not to say the visit is not a crucial moment and it isn't unbelievably powerful, and there should be tremendous focus on it. But underneath the covers, when we peeled back the onion one layer of that group of students who visited, the simple yes or no, did you visit or did not? Inside the group who visited at this institution, they only enrolled at 30%. So only 3 of 10 who visited enrolled, which means the ability to predict who will enroll based upon the visit is worse than a coin flip. And where this really becomes interesting is, and this is where, this is what started to sort of blow our minds, working on this. In our AI models, when we train them to predict who will enroll based upon hundreds of concurrent behaviors, when the models predict and we crack them open to ask them, how did you predict if Mickey's going to enroll versus Jeff? It'll tell us, and we can see. And the campus visit was the 170th ranked item that it looked at. And so, this is an example. We talk about this in the book, but this is an example of where, as we get deeper in the data, these insights started surfacing. And again, it doesn't mean that the visit isn't important, but what it does mean is we have the ability now, by looking at not just what's the visit's impact on a probability of enrollment, but what is the real-time probability based upon all of the combination of behaviors. And what we're seeing is we can now identify that, you visited, Jeff and Mickey both visited, but the sum of all of Mickey's other behaviors and the sum of Jeff's other behaviors, we now can delineate very, very clearly that even though Mickey visited, he's not very high in the intent list. And Jeff visited and is. And now what that allows us to do is to now customize those communications. And there's even a bigger impact, which is the student who didn't visit. And because they didn't visit, they didn't get moved into that group of high priority students, even though they had a higher propensity. What AI has really opened up for us is the ability to move from generalized profile-based groupings to looking at every single student individually. And what we're seeing is the systems and methodologies that we've used for the last 15 years or more, by and large, they've worked. And they can identify the big groups, but they miss the outliers. They miss the edges. They miss effectively the silent student in the back of the room. We catch, with our existing analytics, we catch the students in the front waving their hands, but we miss the edges. And in today's world, and this is part of why Tej and I decided we had to write this, because the world we're in now, enrollment growth is going to be incremental. There's no more big magic pools of students. There's no more giant pools of money. And we have to start catching more of those students on the edge, who, by the way, are fantastic students where we are a great fit, but our existing playbook has been missing them. And that's really the underpinnings of the book.
And so I think what I'm going to tie together here first, you just shared a lot about finding those signals. And when we look at the technology itself, that's how you apply the signals then to know how to target and spend time. So before we go deeper into the technology, one more question here about the book. And maybe this actually is a good segue because it ties them together. In the book, you mentioned that without AI, that type of precision to know and understand all those signals and the responsiveness that you need with a modern enrollment strategy just isn't achievable. You can't get to where you need to be. So what do you say to institutions or institutional leaders who are AI curious but hesitant, either because the data is limited, the cost of the tool, or a lack of internal expertise? How do you jump in to help them
Yeah.
answer or think about that more clearly?
Well, that's very that's a great question, and it's worth noting, sort of, about the book, The Signal Solution, that the book is not necessarily about AI in as much as it is about the rethinking of how enrollment management works and how the institution aligns. So we wrote this book not just for the enrollment leader. We wrote it for the cabinet. We
Yes.
wrote it for counselors. And when we talk with our partners and work with them on the book, it's a transformation in thinking more so than it is a technology. The concepts in the book can be applied in many different ways, and that's really, so when you ask how do we bridge that gap, it's that, just going back to that comfort metrics, one of the things that we talk about when we work with people on the book is, and we run guided workshops that they're like, it's like book club. And
Yep.
to be able to get a team together or an institution and take the concept of a comfort metric and put them down on the table, here are the actual, these are the metrics we're reporting on and that we're making all of these decisions on. And let's put down exactly what they are. There are 15 of them, or there are 22 of them, or there's 4 of them. Here's what they are. And let's talk and challenge ourselves. Do they still mean the same thing now that they did 2 or 3 years ago? And if they do, great. And if they don't, how do we adjust? And so this really is, the intention of the book is, as we sort of described, to lay out a new playbook that's independent of whatever technologies you have in place or plan on putting in place. Now, from our standpoint, we build a platform that is built to enable this. But the book itself, the book isn't about our product. The book is about this transformation that's needed in thinking from the ground up in enrollment management.
Let's go ahead and segue now to the product itself. How long has EnrollML been on the market? How long? 3 years? 4 years?
We've been on the market for 3 years, but
3.
my particular story with EnrollML is a little bit unique in that, and I mentioned at the beginning of this, right, my entry point into higher education was helping operational and financial turnaround performance. And what's unique about my story is that I ended up building EnrollML not for the rest of higher education. I built it for my own personal use, and I used it for 2 years. And it wasn't called EnrollML, but one of my chapters in my life was in software, and I did have some familiarity. There was a point in time when I used to be a very, very bad coder, and I was just familiar enough to realize about 4 or 5 years ago sort of the potential of what was happening here. And what I knew with the institutions that I was working with was that they had an immense amount of sophistication and investment at the top of the funnel, which was true, when I saw firsthand when I came in to enrollment management and to institutions. But what I also realized was that all of the sophistication at the top of the funnel, there was like an equal lack of focus and attention in the middle of the funnel. And that's where I started playing around with some former colleagues from the software world on how AI might be able to get underneath these things. And so, yes, EnrollML has been available for about 3 years now. But the reason it's available is because, having used it with live teams, having to deliver results, I was obviously amazed by what we were able to achieve, and equally amazed by the fact that it didn't exist. And that's when I turned it into a commercial product.
I wish, as you we're talking about the lack of resources in the middle of the funnel. This is one of the times where you wish we recorded this in front of a live studio audience so you could see and hear everyone in the audience stand up and give you a standing ovation around that, because here to that, we've always lacked the right amount of resources in the middle of the funnel, and we know every institution is bleeding prospective students in the middle of the funnel, and that is exactly what EnrollML is there to help support, and to not be a Band-Aid, not be the gauze, but to give a different funnel without holes.
Well, and the problem is, it's not like we all got bad at this overnight. We've spent about a decade or so de-frictioning the application process and to improve access and equity. But
Yes.
the implication or the impact of that on the admissions teams is more applications in the top, more data, and a dilution of the existing signals. When I applied to college, I've got a little bit of gray hair here. I did it on a manual typewriter. I only applied to 5 schools because I didn't have the patience to do any more than that. But all 5 of those knew I was serious. And I interviewed a young data scientist a couple weeks ago and asked them how many colleges they applied to. They said 25. So the problem here is not that we haven't wanted to get more out of the middle, and it's not that we haven't wanted to get more personal and drive deeper connection, which of course in today's world to win those incremental students is mandatory. But it's not that we didn't want to, it's that we didn't know how. And that's really, when I think about the application of AI, I like to talk about vanity AI because there's a lot of that and there's a risk of vanity AI. As someone who spent a portion of my career advising, companies on big systems transformations, I always bias towards really getting into low-level processes and figuring out where exactly inside of processes can we provide a material impact. And that was really the basis of EnrollML, was not trying to solve everything and not trying to solve things that fundamentally weren't the problem. We tried to tackle what I viewed was the biggest problem in the middle, which was not intent, but ability to get to a smaller set of students where we could make a difference. Because just peanut buttering our attention across everyone, again, that's what got us what we're getting now. If we want to improve yield by 1 or 2 or 3 points, and for an institution at 15% yield, that means there's 85 students who said no. There are most certainly students that are on the fence right there, and we missed them. And I will say, even for an institution, let's call it in the massively highly selective tier, for those of us watching who have been involved in reaccreditation processes and had to write those enrollment plans for reaccreditation, what is every institution has a strategic enrollment plan that's documented, and no one in America is nailing every component of it. And so strategic enrollment for a smaller institution maybe help kind of meet our numbers that we've set. But we've worked with R1s where their challenge was far more nuanced. It was a highly strategic subsegment where they needed to be able to get into their funnel with more precision so they could interact more deeply with a smaller set of students.
So I know over the past several months, you've got new features and functionality rolling into the tool. One of the things I know we've talked about that really impressed me was the ability to not just continue to refine that smaller subset of students, but then to start to understand what might be the way or the topic to actually engage that student. How did you get there?
Yeah, well, just to kind of paint a visual for anyone watching that's not familiar with us. What we built and the gap that I saw, I kind of refer to EnrollML oftentimes as the missing layer in the enrollment funnel. And, we are in an AI world now, and we've just started. We're not even we're not even in the first inning yet. But as I like to describe, it already feels like the grand finale of the fireworks show. It's lights, it's noise, it's chaos, and it's tough to sort out what's what. And what we built and build is essentially an AI layer, and you can visualize it by sort of imagine sliding it into the bottom of the funnel. And there are lots of things that generate signal, and there are things that process signal, and there are some tools out there that we all use that generate some signal and process some signal. We are a signal processor. So we sit in the bottom of the funnel and we collect all of the signals from, no matter what your kind of campaigns or tools, no matter how you've changed marketing tactics or techniques, we just sit and wait for those signals. And from those signals, we then create a picture of the student. And from that picture of the student, we are now able to turn that into language, literally an email or a voicemail that the counselors can use to get to this point faster. And what we did, what I was doing 8 years ago, 7 years ago, was sets of complex regression probabilities to try and figure out who should enroll. That what AI has opened up is this slight twist from not what is the probability that someone enrolls, but where are they on the proximity, on the behavioral proximity to a positive decision. And there's in the underpinnings of EnrollML is a lot of consumer decision science. And so the thesis or theory here is, for us to understand how to communicate with the student, we need a complete picture. And to have the complete picture, we need to be able to process all of the signals independent of where they sit in the funnel and what tools they come from or what campaigns or what tactics or strategies. And then fundamentally, where we have kind of taken a little bit of a left turn is we are not interested in sort of the mathematical probability. What we're interested in is, given how this student is behaving, it's not what behaviors have they done or what behaviors do we hope they do next. What we're trying to get at is what's holding them back. And that was really the big breakthrough in the last, let's say, 3 to 4 months, where we've successfully been able to harness generative AI, which I equate to trying to tame a million wild stallions, all at the same time.
Yes.
But fundamentally, what we are doing now, and I say this, obviously it's my company and I'm biased, but I say this also just from the standpoint of being in this industry. And what we're able to produce now is nothing short of mind-blowing in terms of the assessment of a student and then what to say to them, which is very different from trying to push them into an automated campaign. And, it's interesting, as we started testing this, we pulled in 4 different former VPs of admissions. And we did 2 things that were very interesting. The first is we said, look, the intention is to create a nuanced, personal, smart message, email to a student. Mm-hmm. So the intention isn't to just how fast can we do it? The intention is how well can we do it? And we essentially pulled up a slate record and, figuratively started the stopwatch. And by the time we were done, and these are people that were vice presidents of enrollment, mm-hmm. who we all felt we were pretty good at doing this. And by the time we were done trying to process 100 fields, figure out what they all mean with this student, and write the email, it was 45 minutes. And this is the problem. And what we can now do, and by the way, that's if we could process the combination mm-hmm. of actions and behaviors correctly, which the reality is we can't. We all are relying, this goes back to we're relying on elements of the playbook that worked for us in a previous world. This is, when I think about like AI that impacts the real problems that kind of unlock the potential in the applicant pool and in the funnel, we take a process that could take 30 to 45 minutes for one, and we've turned it into seconds. But we are also, I will say, I am personally, and this is sort of our philosophy, we're still a big believer in the humanity of what we do for a living here. I think, this is one of the big 3 or 4 decisions in someone's life. And, I think what the way we think about the application of AI is, how do we force multiply the admissions team? And how do we allow them to get back to focusing on those students? And if we can use AI to process hundreds of pieces of data and turn it into a message that a human can look at and either add to or say, you know what, this has got it nailed. And I now am communicating with these students and doing it in seconds or minutes instead of half an hour to an hour.
45 minutes, yes.
Right. That's, this is where I see, there's lots of other things, agents inside of the admissions process are going to be massively valuable, right? Transfer credits and application processing. But our spot right now is in this moment of collision where AI and enrollment meet with, between institution and student.
You mentioned a few things about a different world, that the other way is a different world. But earlier in the episode, you mentioned a different era. And I'm going to steal that word era in there, because I think, to me, maybe it's because I'm also old at this point. I think it's easier to tell the story about why we need to be looking at this now by saying that other way was a different era. It's not just a different world, it's a different era. And we still operate in so many ways that all the resources go in the top of the funnel. Those aren't necessarily going all to advertising, those resources. They're going to old ways in a different era that we sold things, and at least in other industries, how we sold things by buying lists and all of those things that are 30, 40-year-old tactics at this point that we're still leveraging. And I think it's really important. That's why I wanted to have you on so early as we launch this new show to start showing and demonstrating and talking about the new era, the way that it's not the new way that's coming, it's the new way that is today. And I think that's so important that we start to realize what that is and what that means. So, Geoff, thank you for joining us. This has been a great conversation, folks. Visit the site, check out the solution, go to Amazon, look for the Signal Solution book by Geoff and Tej, and get your copy. I have mine on Kindle. You don't have an audio copy, do you? You didn't do an audio
No,
book.
although someone did tell me that they downloaded it. I don't know what app, but they downloaded it and had it read to them by Snoop Dogg. So
there we
that's
go.
certainly possible.
So talk about a new era.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that you can pick who reads it to you.
And let me mention something about this again. One of the reasons, one more thing about the book, just for people watching, because particularly for the enrollment, folks watching this, I looked this up recently because I was just kind of interested, and somewhere in the neighborhood of 60% or more of CEOs of the Fortune 1,000 companies come out of sales and marketing. But the percentage of college presidents that come out of enrollment or enrollment marketing, right, is closer to 3%. And 3 to 5. And at least that's the data I found. And it matches anecdotally with with the institutions I've worked with.
Yep.
And so that really creates a barrier because that playbook is very deeply ingrained. And, I have to say that in writing this book, I was thinking about this scenario of being able to take this book and hand it to a president who doesn't really understand. If you have not been in enrollment really firsthand, you really don't understand what this entails. I think this can be a catalyst to help institutions align and reset and support the admissions teams on this transformation. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about it, Mickey, and it's always fun, to talk with you.
Absolutely. Again, thank you for joining everyone. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Spark and Scale. We're excited to continue the season. Look forward to having you back on that next episode. We'll see you then.